Hello, everyone, and welcome back to the Speak and Feel English podcast, where we explore practical English that you can use naturally in everyday conversations, professional environments, and academic discussions. I am Mia, and today I am joined by my co-host, Ethan. In this episode, we will be exploring one of the most flexible and commonly used verb families in English: get, got, and getting. Although these words appear simple on the surface, they actually carry a wide range of meanings depending on context, tone, and grammatical structure.
That is absolutely right, Mia. Many English learners initially think that get simply means receive or obtain, but once they begin listening to real conversations, they quickly notice that native speakers use it in dozens of ways. It can refer to change, movement, possession, understanding, obligation, and even emotional states. So today, our goal is not only to explain the grammar, but also to show how these words function naturally in spoken English.
Let us begin with the most basic meaning of get. At its core, get often means to receive or obtain something. For example, if I say, I got an email from my manager this morning, the meaning is simply that I received it. In professional communication, this usage is extremely common, and it sounds natural without being overly formal.
Yes, and another example could be, I need to get a new notebook before the meeting. In that case, get means to obtain or buy something. Notice that the verb does not specify how the action happens. You might purchase it, borrow it, or pick it up from your office. The verb remains flexible, and that is one reason it is so widely used.
Another important use of get is to describe movement or arrival. For instance, we often say, I got home late, or she got to the office early. Here, get replaces more formal verbs like arrive or reach. This makes the sentence sound conversational rather than academic.
Exactly, and this is where learners sometimes hesitate because they wonder whether such usage is correct in professional speech. The answer is yes, as long as the situation is not extremely formal. In meetings, presentations, and workplace discussions, people frequently say things like, did you get to review the document? Or I got to the venue just before the presentation started.
Now, let us talk about got, which is the past form of get. The simplest explanation is that whenever an action involving get already happened, we switch to got. For example, I get many emails every day becomes I got several emails yesterday. The meaning remains the same, but the time frame shifts into the past.
And this is also where we begin to see one of the most interesting features of this verb family. Got can also express possession, particularly in conversational English. When someone says, I have got 2 meetings today, they mean the same thing as I have 2 meetings today. The phrase sounds slightly more conversational, and it is very common in everyday speech.
That is a great point. Many learners worry that using have got might be incorrect, but it's perfectly natural. In fact, you'll often hear people say, I have got an idea, or she has got a lot of experience. The structure is grammatically sound and widely accepted in modern spoken English.
Now let us move on to getting, which is the present participle form. This form is especially useful when we want to describe actions in progress or changes happening over time. For example, if I say, I'm getting better at presentations, the sentence suggests improvement, not just possession.
Yes, and that highlights another major meaning of get. It often expresses change. When we say, it is getting colder, we aren't talking about receiving cold weather. We're describing a gradual shift in temperature. Similarly, if someone says, I'm getting tired, it means their energy level is decreasing over time.
This usage is extremely important because it appears in both casual and professional settings. For example, during a project discussion, someone might say, the situation is getting complicated, or the team is getting more confident. In both cases, getting signals a process of development or change. Let us now explore how get functions when it is combined with adjectives, because this structure appears constantly in both everyday speech and professional communication. One of the most common patterns in English is get plus adjective, which expresses a change of state rather than an action of receiving something. For example, when someone says, "I am getting ready for the presentation," the meaning is not about receiving readiness, but about entering a prepared state.
That is an excellent starting point. Another example would be, he got nervous before the interview. Here, got signals a transition from calmness to nervousness. This is extremely useful because English often prefers verbs of change rather than longer descriptive phrases. Instead of saying, he became nervous, people frequently say he got nervous, which sounds more natural in conversation.
Yes, and this pattern applies to many adjectives. We can say get excited, get confused, get frustrated, get motivated, or get distracted. Each of these constructions highlights a shift in condition. For instance, in a workplace setting, someone might say, "I sometimes get distracted when there are too many notifications," which sounds direct, natural, and conversational.
I agree, and this is also why getting is so valuable in professional discussions. Consider a manager saying, "The team is getting stronger each quarter." The sentence communicates growth in a simple yet powerful way. It avoids complicated structures while still sounding polished and clear.
Another important use involves get plus past participle, which forms what we call a passive-like structure. For example, instead of saying the report was completed yesterday, someone might say the report got completed yesterday. While the second sentence is slightly less formal, it emphasizes the event rather than the process.
That is true, and this structure often appears when we want to highlight unexpected outcomes. If someone says, "My laptop got damaged during travel," the focus is on the unfortunate result. It sounds more personal than the more distant phrase, "My laptop was damaged." Let us now move to another very practical category, get plus preposition combinations, also known as phrasal verbs. These are incredibly common in spoken English, and mastering them can significantly improve fluency. One of the most useful examples is get up, which simply means to rise from bed. For instance, I usually get up at 6 before work. Another extremely common one is get back, which can mean return. Someone might say, "I will get back to you after reviewing the proposal." This phrase appears constantly in professional emails and meetings, and it sounds polite without being overly formal.
Yes, and then we have get through, which can mean complete something difficult or survive a challenging situation. For example, we finally got through the busiest quarter, or I got through the entire report last night. In both cases, the phrase implies effort and persistence.
We should also mention get along, which refers to relationships. If you say, "The new colleagues are getting along well," you are describing positive interaction and cooperation. This expression is often used in workplace evaluations or team discussions.
Absolutely. And one more very important example is get over, which means recover from something, either emotionally or physically. For instance, it took her months to get over the disappointment, or he is getting over a minor illness. These phrases communicate recovery in a natural and empathetic way.
What's interesting about all these examples is that get becomes almost like a helper verb, shaping the meaning through context rather than standing alone. This flexibility makes it incredibly efficient for conversation, but it also means learners must pay attention to surrounding words.
That is a key insight. Instead of memorizing a single definition, it is better to think of get as a verb of transition, movement, or result. Whether it signals arrival, change, completion, or emotional shift, it often points to movement from one state to another.
Exactly, and this idea will help listeners understand even unfamiliar phrases. If you hear a new expression with get, you can often infer that it involves some form of change or outcome. For example, if someone says, "We are getting closer to the deadline," the meaning is clear even if you have never heard the exact phrase before. So, Ethan, let us now move into a slightly more advanced area of usage, where get, got, and getting begin to express ideas beyond simple actions or changes. One of the most important functions of get in spoken English is its role in expressing obligation and necessity. For example, when someone says, "I have to get this report finished today," the verb get does not merely mean obtain. Instead, it signals completion and responsibility.
That is a great example. Another common sentence would be, "We need to get the project approved before the deadline." Here, get highlights the idea of achieving a required result.
It emphasizes that the action must lead to an outcome, not just an attempt. This makes the sentence sound purposeful and action-oriented.
Yes, and this structure appears constantly in workplace conversations. You might hear phrases such as, "Let us get this meeting started," or "We should get the discussion moving." In both cases, get introduces momentum and signals that something needs to begin or progress.
Exactly. Now, let us talk about how get is used to express opportunity or permission. Consider the sentence, "I got to speak with the director after the presentation." In this context, got to does not mean possession. It means the speaker had the opportunity to do something. It subtly suggests that the experience was valuable or noteworthy.
That is an excellent observation. Similarly, someone might say, "Did you get to attend the conference?" The question is not about receiving attendance. It is about whether the person had the chance to participate. This usage is extremely natural and appears frequently in both casual and professional dialogue.
We should also mention the phrase get to when it expresses permission in a more enthusiastic tone. For instance, "I get to work with a talented team," implies privilege and appreciation. The structure adds emotional color to the sentence, making it sound more expressive than simply saying, "I work with a talented team."
That emotional dimension is important because get often carries subtle meaning beyond grammar. For example, when someone says, "I got promoted last year," the verb not only communicates the event, but also suggests achievement and progress. It feels more dynamic than the more neutral phrase, "I was promoted."
Now let us turn our attention to getting in continuous forms, because this is where the verb becomes especially powerful in storytelling and explanation. If I say, "The company is getting more competitive," I am describing an ongoing development rather than a fixed state. This gives listeners a sense of movement and evolution.
Yes, and we hear this often in performance reviews or strategic discussions. A leader might say, "Our clients are getting more selective," or "The market is getting more complex." These sentences communicate trends, not just facts. That is why getting is so effective in analytical conversations.
Another important pattern is get someone to do something, which means persuade or cause an action. For instance, "I finally got the team to agree on the schedule." The sentence implies effort and negotiation, suggesting that the result did not happen automatically.
That structure is extremely useful in both professional and personal contexts. You might say, "She got the client to reconsider the proposal," or "He got his colleagues to support the new strategy." In each case, get highlights influence and outcome.
And there is also the passive version of this idea, such as "I got asked to lead the project." This sounds slightly more conversational than "I was asked," and it often carries a sense of unexpected opportunity or recognition.
Exactly, and that nuance is what makes get such a fascinating verb. It often conveys involvement, movement, or emotional context that more formal verbs do not fully capture. This is why mastering it can significantly improve conversational fluency.
Before we move on, let us briefly summarize what we explored in this segment. We discussed how get expresses obligation, opportunity, and influence. We also saw how getting describes ongoing trends and developments, especially in analytical or professional settings. Let us now move into a particularly interesting area of English usage, which involves idiomatic expressions and conversational shortcuts built around get, got, and getting. These expressions are extremely common in natural speech, and understanding them can make a significant difference in how fluent and confident someone sounds during conversations.
That is very true, because idiomatic uses of get often appear in situations where speakers want to sound relaxed yet precise. One of the most widely used expressions is get going. If someone says, "We should get going," they are not referring to obtaining movement. Instead, they are suggesting that it is time to leave or begin an activity. This phrase is polite, efficient, and widely accepted in both social and professional contexts.
Another excellent example is get the hang of something, which means to learn how to do something through practice. For instance, a colleague might say, "It took me a few weeks to get the hang of the new software." The expression implies gradual understanding rather than immediate mastery, which makes it useful in learning environments.
Yes, and in a similar way, we often hear the phrase, "get the point." When someone says, "I get the point," they are not talking about receiving a physical object. They are expressing understanding. This usage highlights how get can represent mental processes, not just physical actions.
That leads nicely into another extremely common phrase, get it. If a manager explains a complex concept and a team member replies, yes, I get it, the response signals comprehension. It is short, natural, and widely used in both formal discussions and everyday conversations.
Let us also consider expressions that describe emotional reactions. For example, get upset, get excited, get worried, or get frustrated. These constructions allow speakers to describe emotional transitions quickly. Instead of saying, I began to feel frustrated, people naturally say, I got frustrated. The second version sounds more conversational and immediate.
That immediacy is important because it reflects how people actually speak. In real-time conversations, speakers often prefer verbs that communicate change quickly. Another example is get stuck, which means being unable to proceed. Someone might say, I got stuck on the last section of the report, implying difficulty rather than physical immobility.
Yes, and in meetings, you might hear someone say, let us not get stuck on minor details. Here, the phrase is metaphorical. It suggests that focusing too long on small issues can prevent progress. This is a great example of how get supports abstract reasoning as well as concrete actions.
We should also discuss get around to something, which refers to finally finding time to do something delayed. For instance, I finally got around to reviewing your proposal. This phrase communicates completion while acknowledging that the task had been postponed.
Another helpful expression is get out of something, which often means avoiding an obligation. If someone says he tried to get out of attending the meeting, it implies that he attempted to avoid responsibility. This phrase appears frequently in workplace storytelling and casual conversation.
And then there is get ahead, which refers to making progress or achieving success. For instance, she works hard because she wants to get ahead in her career. The phrase emphasizes advancement and ambition, making it very useful in professional discussions.
All of these expressions demonstrate how get functions as a dynamic verb that links actions, outcomes, and emotional responses. Instead of memorizing each phrase individually, it helps to remember that get usually signals movement towards a result, whether that result is physical, emotional, intellectual, or professional.
That insight is essential for learners because it reduces the need to memorize isolated meanings. Once you understand the core idea of transition or outcome, many expressions become easier to interpret. If someone hears a new phrase like, we are getting somewhere, they can infer that it means progress is being made.
Exactly. And this ability to infer meaning from context is what transforms vocabulary knowledge into true conversational fluency. In the final part of our discussion, we will bring everything together by demonstrating how get, got, and getting function across storytelling, professional dialogue, and everyday interaction. As we move into the final segment of our discussion, let us bring everything together by looking at how get, got, and getting function across storytelling, professional communication, and everyday interaction. One of the reasons this verb family is so powerful is that it allows speakers to communicate actions, changes, results, and experiences in a very efficient way. Instead of relying on multiple formal verbs, English speakers often use get to keep speech natural and dynamic.
That is an excellent point, Mir, because when we analyze real conversations, we notice that get often appears in moments where something shifts. For example, in storytelling, someone might say, I got a message late at night, and that is when things started getting interesting. In that sentence, got marks the beginning of an event, while getting signals the development that follows. The verb family helps structure the narrative without requiring complicated grammar.
Yes, and this narrative function is extremely useful in professional contexts as well. Imagine someone presenting a project update and saying, at first the results were unclear, but we eventually got better data, and the analysis started getting more precise. The verbs guide listeners through the timeline and make the explanation feel fluid rather than mechanical.
Another important advantage of get is its role in making speech sound approachable. If someone says, I received clarification from the client, the sentence is correct but slightly formal. However, if they say, I got clarification from the client, the meaning remains professional while sounding more conversational. This balance is often ideal in modern workplace communication.
Exactly. And we also see this in collaborative discussions. For instance, a team leader might say, let us get everyone aligned before we move forward. The sentence conveys coordination and action in a concise way. It avoids unnecessary complexity while still sounding decisive and organized.
Let us also consider how getting helps describe progress over time. If someone says, "We are getting closer to a solution," the phrase creates a sense of momentum. It tells listeners that movement is happening, even if the final result has not yet arrived. This makes communication feel optimistic and forward-looking.
And when we shift to personal experiences, the verb becomes equally effective. Someone might say, "I got the opportunity to lead my first workshop, and that experience helped me grow." Here, got highlights the moment of opportunity, while the rest of the sentence describes the impact. It feels natural and engaging.
What is interesting is that even when get appears simple, it often carries emotional nuance. If someone says, "I got really motivated after that conversation," the verb reflects both the event and the internal shift. This emotional connection is one reason the word appears so frequently in authentic speech.
Before we conclude, let us briefly review the key insights from this entire discussion. We explored how get can express receiving, arriving, changing, completing, influencing, understanding, and progressing. We saw how got marks past experiences and often emphasizes outcomes, and we learned how getting describes ongoing development, trends, and transitions.
Exactly. And the central idea connecting all these meanings is movement toward a result. Whether the result is physical, emotional, intellectual, or professional, get often signals that something is shifting from one state to another. Once learners understand that concept, they can interpret many expressions naturally without memorizing each one separately.
That is such an important takeaway. Fluency does not come from memorizing isolated definitions, but from understanding how words behave in real communication. When listeners start noticing how frequently get, got, and getting appear in conversations, they can begin using them more confidently in their own speech.
And that confidence is exactly what we aim to support through these discussions. The more comfortable you become with versatile verbs like this, the more natural your English will sound in meetings, presentations, interviews, and everyday conversations.
Thank you all for joining us today on the Speak and Feel English podcast. If you found this episode helpful and would like to continue improving your conversational English with us, be sure to subscribe to the channel and explore all the podcast episodes for more practical language insights.